We're live on Facebook. Okay. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Good
How are
morning.
you out there in
Afternoon.
Facebook Live? Hey, it's Wellness Wednesday.
Wellness
Hello.
Wednesday.
Yay. 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 And we're welcoming back Rich today. Well, who are you? Welcoming Rich. I'm Beth Copeland with Georgia Christian Business Network, and we are putting God back in business. I am so excited today. You know, Wellness Wednesday is such a wonderful opportunity to help you grow mentally well, mentally healthy. And we have experts, professionals on our panel that are regular hosts that help you help you to do that. And what I like to always do is give them an opportunity to introduce themselves, but I'm going to tell them something. Yesterday was a tidbit. Lee Gant from Georgia United, who is our community partner, well, we're a community partner with them. It's a great opportunity for our GCBN members and the benefits that are associated therewith. So if you missed that show, you need to join it. But one thing in particular that she said in the midst of Take Charge Tuesday power call is that she's missing her Wellness Wednesdays because she's been so busy, but she catches the replay. So I wanted to send you guys that shout out and thank Lee for that feedback as well, because we're doing a great work here at Wellness Wednesday, and we refuse, like Nehemiah, to come down. So at this point, I'd like to ask our corporate sponsors, Pamela, Bridgeman, Bartell, and Rich Oswald, and not necessarily in that order, to introduce themselves.
Sure. Yeah, I'm back. I start again. Yes, like Beth said, my name is Rich Oswald. I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Georgia. I work with individuals, couples, and families, helping them deal with maybe immediate needs to help communication or deal with grief or loss, or helping with parenting or whatever other things may be going on in the immediate circumstances, or helping solve long-term issues and patterns of relationship, so that moving forward you can have a better relationship, better connection, better experience of life. And like Andy Stanley says, for those of us who follow Jesus, believe, Jesus helps us to be better at life and makes us life better for us. I believe yes. I think that's the way he says
Awesome.
it.
I love that.
But
That is so good.
Good stuff. So background in engineering and auto mechanics and carpentry and all that fun stuff too. So I build stuff and fix stuff in a variety of ways, at least try to. Measure twice, cut once. One of the jokes is I've cut it and still too short. And
Legacy Counseling.
yes, legacycounselingga.com, a little bitty town called Snellville that is not so litty bitty anymore because they're adding hundreds and hundreds of apartment complexes and houses and all that stuff. So yeah.
Wow.
It's growing.
You should have heard that shout out that Pamela gave to you last week. She tried to do the quote of what is the mantra for what do you call it?
Oh, where everybody's proud to be somebody.
Yeah. I think she messed it up, but it was okay.
I think I got it correctly. My name is my name is Pamela Bridgeman, and I am a licensed clinical social worker and certified master addictions counselor. And I do the same kinds of things that Rich does. And since he said those so well and so succinctly, hope you remember that. We serve here at A Healing Journey in Cartersville, Georgia. Children starting as young as 5, and we go all the way up to geriatrics 99. Literally the oldest person that I've had in my practice was 92 years old, and he was a delight to work with. I'm also a United States Air Force veteran and ordained minister. I've been doing compassionate care since 1976, and I love it.
Outstanding.
Today we're continuing the conversation about transformation. Last week we talked about, we sort of did the definition. What is transformation? And we began to talk about why it's necessary. And Beth knows me, Rich knows me. I love metaphors. And so the metaphor I used last week had to do with the butterfly. Transformation is like the metamorphosis of the butterfly. And there were some key things in that transformation. And that is that it is not simply a change. It is a change that, using Rich's word, I'm gonna take steps out of my vocabulary because I like it is an experience that one goes through from one end of the spectrum to the other, and with that butterfly and with the transformation that we have to make in terms of our mental health, it is. So we're there with this ugly larva, and we're crawling on the ground and we're eating dirt. And then there is something that clicks. Scientist says that the moth or the caterpillar, while it's still larvae form, there's a chemical in the brain that goes off that tells them that it is now time to begin weaving that cocoon that they go in. And Rich, I think that in counseling, that's what you and I would call the aha moment. It's when that person gets that aha moment and they finally say, you know what, I need to really start looking at this. And in the stages of change model, that's when we call it the contemplation. They begin to contemplate, okay, yeah, I need to do something. And so the larvae then begins to spin this. And we mentioned last week what the botanist not the botanist, but the biologist tells us is that caterpillar doesn't just spin that cocoon just any old place, but rather under a protective place. And I have started looking at trees to see if I can see a cocoon, to see if it really is. It's either under a leaf or it's protected, it is covered. And so, Rich, when people come to you and I, it's almost as though we're helping to be that covering that they have as they are making that internal change, because that's what the caterpillar is doing while they're in that change. And I never knew this because it's not my field of study, but so the caterpillar is actually changing within the cocoon. It's going from place to, it's getting better and better and better while it's within the cocoon before it finally bursts out and become the butterfly. But one of the things, and Beth pointed it out last week, and I thought it was really good, and maybe you can comment on this, Beth, if you remember what you said, but while that caterpillar was on the ground, it was eating dirt.
Oh, yes.
When you want to take over there, but when it got into the...
Go ahead, the nectar, yeah.
Right, well, so it was eating dirt on the ground. While it's in the cocoon, it is those enzymes that it actually developed. So that's why I needed the aha moment, so that in that cocoon, that spinning is leading it from one place to one place, so that it knows what it needs to do in order to grow and transform and become that butterfly. And once it becomes a butterfly, as an untransformed creature, it was eating dirt. But be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and perfect and acceptable will of God. By being a transformed or a transformed creature, it's eating nectar as a butterfly. So we concluded the question we had last week was, why is it necessary? So you can go from eating dirt to eating nectar. So you can, so you can go from give me a mental health analogy, Rich. So what a person goes from being unstable.
Dysfunctional, poor communication, low self-esteem, those sorts of things, eating those ants, right? To automatic negative thoughts, to believing truth and living more free and more in line with the way they're wired, and what they're feeding themselves is truth and beautiful and wonderful and experiencing joy and peace and connection.
You know,
From dirt to nectar.
This is so good, because all of those things that are the dysfunctional part identifies with the dirt crawling, crawling in the dirt. And I was thinking when I was promoting this morning, elevation through living a transformed life. And that's what we're talking about. That's what Pamela's revisited from last week, that we'll continue our discussion today. And when she said that, I wanted to hear her take on it, because I remember what I said. Believe it or not, I do remember, because I thought the sweetness, and that's what I was looking for, of life. Because, honestly, when I was a kid, I'm sure I tasted dirt. It was not appealing. That's something I left out. But as a kid, I also tasted sweet things like sugar, and I had to fight that thing, because I tend to continue now in my later life to identify what that is appealing to me. And so what God was just further speaking to me is those things that he wants to provide for us are the sweetest of life, and I haven't tasted dirt recently and have no desire whatsoever. You know what I'm saying?
Because once you transformed, if you are truly transformed, you don't go back. But I also don't want us to miss, from a mental health perspective, I also don't want us to miss that cocoon stage. Because it doesn't just go from the caterpillar to the butterfly. There's that cocoon stage of transformation that has to happen. In business, Beth, you do it. Sometimes they have incubators, or you train people. I think it's important.
You have to listen. There's a stage. Yes, good girl. Bring us back, because we're going too fast. Yeah, because that period of separation, I call it isolation for separation for his glorification. We have this outstanding vision of what we want to obtain to for business or for life. Moses in Exodus, he knew his calling. He was to save his brethren. And he went out there and started slaying folk left and right. And he wasn't prepared for his calling. So God took him out of that setting.
Put him in a cocoon, backside of the mountain. Cocoon.
Yes, in the cocoon. Yeah, there you go. And he separated him. He put him in an isolated state for the purpose of separating him to be prepared. And so there he was on, working on his father-in-law. The backside of the desert is the piece that I like, which places him directly into the cocoon, And with having said that, the end is to transform life. When you get to the butterfly, we're going to go through a couple other things before we really talk about that. But the opportunity is for his glorification. So isolation, separation for his glorification. And if we look at if we discount the cocoon stage, we're going to miss.
Well, that is the transformation
identity
stage.
Okay, go ahead, Rich. Go ahead.
That is the transformation part. It happens within the cocoon. The butterfly is the butterfly outside. The caterpillar is the caterpillar outside. The magic of the transformation happens where we're not seeing it. Right? That the cocoon looks the same regardless of whether there's a caterpillar or a butterfly in it. It doesn't change.
Oh my God. You know what? That is so good. Rich is just on it. He ate his sweeties, Pamela.
I thank you, Rich. It segues into what we need to talk about today. Go ahead, Beth.
But one point on what he just said, the appearance, people see the image of where you are as a successful business. What they fail to see is the developmental stages. In that cocoon. And like Rich said, that growth has happened, that stripping away of what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And it may be that you were supposed to be doing it as Moses. However, your timing is important, and that you're prepared, and you just don't go out slaying people because that's what God called you to do. But it is,
and the reason it's
wait, one quickie. It's we've got to make certain that as we're in the cocoon, that we're in a protected space, as Pamela said.
That's what I was getting ready to point out.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I should let you have it then. No. Okay. A protected space, and if we allow God to do the development, and that's why I say, from a standpoint of Georgia Christian business ownership, why is vitally important. And you can call it a plug or whatever, but I'm telling you the truth, to be connected with GCBN, because we are putting God back in business. And on this platform, I Take Charge Tuesday, our Friday Small Business, is an opportunity for you to hear how the word connects in that cocoon stage to what God has called you to do for business. God is in every aspect of our lives. And if you're a Christian and you name the name of the Lord as your Savior, and you have a kingdom business, there ought to be some kind of opportunity for you to be connected with that spiritual development side. I'm not talking about for your life. You can go to church and everything, but for your business. To be connected with like-minded Christian business people. And when Moses was in there, he was a businessman. He had a calling. He was going to lead a leader. He was going to lead the people, but he had to experience that cocoon stage. And it's so important that we, like Moses, adhere to, surrender to God and say, you shape me, you mold me, you determine who I'm supposed to be and how it's supposed to look. I got one more point. Can I get it?
You're really segueing. Yeah, I mean,
am I okay segueing?
Yeah,
just one more point. I'm flying to Orlando Tuesday. I'm speaking at a women's event for Krista Parker and the Christian Business Chamber of Commerce. And I'm so excited about that. But I'll give you a nugget that I'm going to share with those ladies. This is so appropriate for where we are right now in experience transformation. There's a whole lot of talk going around, a trending word. I'm presenting my best version of self. You know, God gave me just a download about that. He said, when I say that, what I'm presenting is that I have some kind of power or authority of who I'm supposed to be. He said, I'd rather you challenge them to be their best version of who I've created them to be.
I like that.
You know, and that's where we've got to get to. If we're going to experience a transformed life, sometimes if I'm the one that's determining what my best version of self is, if it doesn't align with who God called me to be, it is going to be a barrier to my experience and all that he has for me. Absolutely. And that's all I want to say about that.
Okay. So today we're talking about transformation, being a living sacrifice as to make that transformation. There are two things that Rich, one thing that Rich said and one thing that Beth said that fits directly into our topic today. One, the transformation as a living sacrifice. That caterpillar, while he's still in the cocoon, does not die to self, which tells us to do, but he doesn't die. He's living. He's alive. Sacrifice, as Beth just pointed out, means to surrender. And so in order to have a true transformation, you've got to live, and this means you have got to intentionally choose to become. You've got to intentionally choose to become. There's a book that I often use in my therapy session. It's called Hope for the Flowers. I don't know if you've seen it, Rich, but it talks about the caterpillar sees all these bunch of caterpillars at the foot of this tree, and he and his friend go, and the friend goes up and never comes back. And that's the legacy of it, that people go to this tree, or the caterpillars go to this tree and they never come back. But that's because they're transforming on the way up. They're going up, they're spinning their cocoons on the leaves. They're not coming back down to the ground as a caterpillar, right? They are intentionally, get me, they're making a decision to go to that place where they're going to spin that cocoon. If they don't, if the caterpillar never gets to a place where it can spin its cocoon, it never becomes a butterfly because it never has the opportunity to do those biological things that it needs to do in order to transform. So intentionality, transformation requires intentionality. The second thing transformation requires is surrender. You got to surrender to the experience, the process. You have to surrender to the process. You cannot transform without surrender. So if you're talking about business, you're talking about making sure that you're following whatever your policies and procedures say that they are, and all of that. If you're talking about therapy with Rich and I, one of the things, I don't always promote 12-step programs. So one of the things I like that the 12-step community says is the program works if you work the program. It works if you work it, if you surrender. So sometimes people will come into therapy and you may hear them out in the community saying, well, therapy doesn't work. Well, no, it doesn't. Therapy does not work.
You work.
You work. You know?
Good point.
So in order to live this transformed life, you've got to be intentional about getting to the place where you can do the things to begin the transformation process. And then you have to surrender to the process.
That is so good. I love it. Surrender is a big one. And even back to, I had no idea I was going to be talking about this with Moses, but God just placed it in my spirit to share. And it is so connected to where Pam's segue into what we're talking about today. And I see again, surrender the way that I believe that I'm to live, or the way that I'm to manage my business, and allow him to shape that and renew me and reform me into what he has, because he's the creator and he has the plan, Rich. You know, when you think of your building, you need a plan. You need some idea of what it's going to look like. And a lot of times the difficulty with transformation, and what I said earlier about experiencing your best self, or what is it that they're saying now? My best version of self. Right. The opportunity is, if I start looking at Pamela, or if I start looking at Rich, and thank you for joining us, Tony, and I start to say, well, they're doing this in their business, and maybe I could shape GCBN to look more like, Legacy, or whatever, or, what, and we start to pick and choose, and then we don't look like anything. We don't look like GCBN. We don't look like wealth builders like Tony. We don't look like Healing Journey. We don't even look like Legacy or anything, or any combination of that, because it gets all crazy looking, and there's no glory for God out of that, and I love it that we're identifying. We love self-care here at Wellness Wednesday, and we're encouraging you to make sure that you take care of self first, and, so to speak, put the mask on you. But the other opportunity is, don't be so caught up in what someone else is doing and trying to put the mask on you because they have the mask on them. You understand? Can you help me with this one? Because what I'm feeling in my spirit, and this came to me just a little bit before the show, and God was just speaking to me, is a lot of people are truly challenged with, who am I? You know, what am I supposed to be doing? And I'm hearing these people talking about being my best version of self, and I'm trying to identify with that, but I'm still confused about who I am, what I'm supposed to be doing, what God has called me to do. So I start to look around and I lose focus of going to the Creator, and I start to look around to see, and I start to get appeal, and is this looks appealing or that looks appealing. So I said, well, I'll do that. The issue with that is you're getting further and further away from what God says about you. The transformed life that God is looking for from us is to becoming closer to Him in intimacy. And the closer that we are intimately connected to Him, then He is the one that is going to affirm who we are and what He has created us to do, because He has created us on purpose for a specific purpose. And He's the only one that can tell you what that purpose is.
So remember, the caterpillar does not become a bumblebee. It becomes a caterpillar. So if you're truly transforming, going through your process, if it's truly your cocoon that's being spun, you're going to come out as that authentic person. But if you, as Beth said, are looking to pull the webs from the spider web, you might spin yourself with spider web, but you're not going to come out a spider, because that's not who you are. Not only that, but you're going to die in the process, because the biologist says that's what's in the cocoon. It's what that caterpillar has been collecting as it has been eating along the way, and that becomes its nutrition. So that spinning from that spider doesn't have that nutrition in it. So like Beth said, you have got to work with what God has put in you. He has given all of us a measure of faith. Well, actually, the scripture says the measure of faith. So He's given all of us the measure of faith, but He's given each of us different gifts. So you have to identify, you use the measure of faith to identify what is your specific gift, and then spin your cocoon around what God has placed inside of you. Because, again, using the biology analogy, it is what you were consuming as a caterpillar that's going to make you that strong butterfly, because you're going to be consuming it while you're in your cocoon.
Wow. I have a scripture, and Pamela, I don't know if this is on your list to share today, but Jeremiah 1:5. And I just love it. And I'm going to read it from the Good News translation. If I can find it here. Here we go. I chose you before I gave you life, and before you were born, I selected you to be a prophet to the nations. And then one other translation that I want to say is, before I formed you in the belly, but I thought it was another one that I was familiar with, that I wanted to share. Hold on. Mm-hmm. I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. See, God knows us. We spent time with Him before we got here. He said, before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as my prophet to the nations. And that's just the New Living Translation of that. And the reason I wanted to read that, because I keep talking about Creator. He is our Creator. That transformation that we so desire, I wish there were an opportunity for us to just spend time talking about, what does transformation look like for your life from our perspective? And does that align with what transformation looks like from God's perspective? You know, what he has called us to do. Because sometimes when we compare, and I'm going to just put it out there, we have tendencies to compare ourselves. And Paul told us, compare ourselves against ourselves is not wise. And when I said earlier, I'm going to go all the way live with this one, what I was alluding to. He's the only one that can tell you what your purpose is, because there's a lot of people going around telling people what they're not and what they are. I know a lot of people, even my age, you know, I'm 63. I know people in their 60s and 70s and 80s that are still carrying, and even some in their 30s and 40s and 50s too. Okay, so just anyone has an opportunity to be carrying around what something that someone spoke to them in their lives, in their life. And so the opportunity is what I'm talking about. Transformation covers you on that. There are people that said you wouldn't make it. You weren't this and you weren't that. I know. And I see the result and the outcome of that, even present day, for people that haven't resolved that. And so what we're given an opportunity to hear for this show and the two that follow is to exemplify that God even knew it. Pamela's been telling us, Romans 12, that you and I can experience a transformed life if we just humble ourselves and surrender ourselves to allow God to take us through those stages. And the metamorphosis is just great that you used, you know, with the process of the butterfly, because we are here in a state initially that God never intended for us to be. We're not supposed to be crawling around in the dirt. We're supposed to be colorful and beautiful and flapping our wings and just experiencing the sky as a limit.
Mm-hmm.
And some of us are still, we haven't gone through the process of the stages, and we're still in the dirt. And God is saying today is your day.
Absolutely.
To rise up.
Yeah.
That scripture talks about a living, we were talking about a living sacrifice, and Romans talks about what, so you can prove what is acceptable to God. And then Psalm 51:7 says that the sacrifice that is acceptable to God is a broken spirit and a broken and a contrite heart God would not despise. And in this case, he's not talking about broken as in depressed and all that, but rather that, remember earlier in this conversation, we talked about surrender. So the sacrifice acceptable to God is a surrendered spirit and a contrite, a truly humble heart. That is what is acceptable. And that is, even when, again, this is Wellness Wednesday, even when we come back and we're talking about our mental health, which isn't it sort of when people get to that place where they're able to say, I'm just going to, I'm going to follow the process. I'm going to not be so arrogant that I think that I don't need input or I don't need someone to nurture or along the way. It's when they come to this place of surrender and an humble heart, a softened heart, that you and I are able to facilitate. And for those of you listening, hear me when I say that Rich and I don't give advice, we don't fix, we facilitate. You do the work. You allow God, you allow yourself to hear what, perhaps is being said through us, but we don't fix and we don't give advice. We facilitate you to your aha moment. But isn't that what happens with healing, Rich, in our field?
as far as facilitating and that sort of thing.
As far as them coming to that place of truly being humble and.
Yeah, and I'm sitting over here coming from part of engineering and geeking out and looking at the parallels between butterfly and people, and keeping in mind that in the butterfly analogy, it's a once and done full out transformation from caterpillar to butterfly, and it's a physical transformation of an insect. When it comes to applying that to humans, I think it gets a little bit more complicated because it's not just a physical transformation.
Right.
So there's physical transformations we can choose to do, right? Humble ourselves with diet and exercise and recognize we can't keep doing it the way we're doing it and expect something different to happen, right? And sometimes that goes through a sort of evolutionary process, right? We humble ourselves in particular places, in particular levels, and our own experiences, and then that transforms what we're doing, what we're thinking, and we grow in that. And then the proverbial peeling of the onion, we revisit the need to transform further, and that requires another level of humility, another level of seeking help. And I talk about 5 different kind of aspects of people as well, and we can do transformations in all of those, right? The physically I already mentioned, the intellectual, which we say, God, renewing of our mind. There's challenging and humbling to say we don't know everything, we can't process everything, we're not that smart, and we may have some theories or approaches that are different, that are incorrect, and addressing that knowledge. And then emotionally being able to humble ourselves and address that we feel things, but for guys in particular, but it also applies to every women as well. Guys in particular aren't taught to know what we feel and be able to articulate very well. We have just a few options that are kind of socially appropriate or expected. So we have to humble ourselves emotionally to recognize we do have more in there to address and evolve and produce and our own story emotionally, right? And then relationally is another aspect that we can humble ourselves in and recognize we don't really know what we're doing, or we have some issues that are good and some things that aren't so good, and we need to kind of cocoon up a bit and figure out what in the world's going on with our ability to relate with other people, and that opens up a whole bunch of aspects in the process. And then the 5th one I typically recognize is the spiritual aspect too, that we're spiritual beings, and there's a humbling and transforming that comes along, and all these things kind of interact together, that there are specific things we can focus on for each of them as well. Just coming to Christ is a spiritual transformation that happens, and we become from a non-Jesus follower to a Jesus follower, from a hard heart to a soft heart. But there's still things to grow in and transform in our spiritual knowledge, awareness, understanding, skill sets, that we just keep reapplying the caterpillar butterfly parallel analogy, or whatever the correct term is, metaphor, there you go, to our lives. So keeping people reminding that it's not a once and done thing. There's no way in the complexity of us as human beings have any ability to go through one experience and all of a sudden be a butterfly and not have any issues with that. That's just an incorrect perspective in it. So we need to make sure we keep that complexity in mind and not be discouraged as well to say, well, I've already been through this cocoon thing. It's like, well, you've transformed in part, right? We're not going to transform completely. Even on this side of heaven, it's not really possible. There's too many things to work on.
Well, Paul says we go from faith to faith, right?
Yep.
Grace to grace and faith to faith. We're constantly as you said, Rich, transforming, moving.
Yep, that verse of God.
And in that same passage we're looking at for our topic, he says, well, no, it's a different book. He says, I die daily. So.
Right. This is what I was going to interject. It's not a one and done. That's what we're talking about with elevation. It's a continual ascension in your mind and aligning your feet to follow that path. I'm so glad you went through that, because it's so freeing for anyone thinks, well, I've been there in that cocoon state and I'm still having challenges.
Right.
I think it's what Pamela says that is so key. I think it's great to metaphor, to use this as a object lesson, having gone through this process. The key to what Rich is saying is that we remember that we're not necessarily comparing apples to apples, but it's the process that we're talking about. So thank you for pointing that out. But then again, on top of that, not to negate that, I want to say that is a process that you will have to continue to go through in life. Because I believe what Pamela is saying, I'm going to say it like this, from glory to glory. In between those glories, things happen. And what we have to understand is another glory is down the road, but we've got to get through this problem or challenge or issue that's happening right now. I've experienced some levels of growth in that glory. I'm headed to the next opportunity to experience, because he said from glory to glory, my next opportunity for glory. But right here in the midst of where I am right now, stuff is happening. So I have the opportunity right here to experience transformation from how that thing wants to shape me to how God, who foreknew that this thing I would embark upon it, has already called me forth into my next opportunity to experience his glory. And so what I have to do is sometimes retreat, take away, go back into that cocoon state so that I can come out again with that colorful wings that are just taking me higher and higher in him. That's the way I want. That's the way when I'm listening to you, Rich, I hear you and I love it. And I think it is totally appropriate for those that are listening and those that will have an opportunity to listen to the replay to know that God's strength, his grace is sufficient for us to carry us from one opportunity to the next and to keep us even protected when we're, I love the way Pamela said that, protected and experience. Those are my two takeaways from today is protected. I'm in that state, of I'm not going to be what I was. I'm transforming, as Rich said, during that state. And I'm protected while I'm in that state. But when I work through this and I start to shed off, watch out. This is just awesome. I love this.
Yeah. You continue to look at some of the details of that metaphor as well. That there's protection, but there's still vulnerability. I'm not sure that every caterpillar that builds a cocoon doesn't have the opportunity to be eaten by a bird or something else. So there's a trusting the process there. They have to go through it, right? It's that they sort of die to themselves. They no longer a caterpillar. To me, kind of thinking of if they don't do the cocoon thing, will they eventually die just as a caterpillar? They won't ever transform into a butterfly and have that opportunity. And it's in the cocoon, there's a wrestling match going on. I think, I'm not sure for this, but I don't know if they have a time-lapse video of cocoons. I mean, if you can see the movement inside the cocoon through the cocoon.
I didn't look that up. I just looked up. I just
take it farther along to kind of God's imagery is practical for lots of different things. So they keeping that in mind too. And when the butterfly breaks out of the cocoon, it's not just a woo, come out and fly. They have to wrestle and push and squeeze themselves
so
out.
good.
And their wings are not developed completely at that point. They have to fan them out and they have to sit in the sun for a while to dry them out so that they become strong enough to fly. They're not strong enough right out of the cocoon. So there's lots of different parts of this that we have to keep in mind. Details are incredibly important. We don't want to brush over those when we're looking at transformation either. And sometimes as a counselor, the directive part, I can sometimes be directive. I facilitate the discussion, but some people just don't know this stuff. So we have to give them some of the information, which is why we're doing this as well, to say, okay, you don't know what it looks like. Here are some of the experiences you may have going through it. It's not mandatory, but keep this in mind and don't be discouraged because this is how things work.
Right.
I think as we're trained and live, we kind of get a better handle of how this whole world is just built and what to kind of expect in some ways of how processes happen. Each person's story is uniquely theirs and their factors involved are completely unique to theirs, but there are also patterns there. I mean, I'd say as people, we can study. This whole thing of psychology is studying human patterns and figuring out what things work. And I know from studying from experience, I can point out things in people. And you've probably done this, Pamela, when it comes to marriages and infidelity. Sometimes I say, oh, is this what happened? And they look at me and go, were you living with us? And I, no, but it's a pattern of human behavior. And we just understand you're not different, but this is how it works. And if you want to transform through it, this is some of the steps you need to do, but you still need to do. And I can't hold your hand and walk you through it, but I can give you some direction in facilitating it. Because I know for me, I've gone into going, what am I supposed to do? And some of us early on, in particular, the transformation things. And I remember that in my own life, you just have no idea. You don't know where to start. You don't know what's going on. You don't have the encouragement. You don't necessarily believe it's even true. You have a mountaintop experience and then you kind of fall back down in the valley and get lost in that. And it's every place in life has a particular thing. And one more mention just on the counseling part, because my wife and I were talking about this, we coach as well. We aren't just interested in getting you into the cocoon to wrestle to transform for that. We're aiming for you to become the butterfly in each of your aspects of yourself, to become more like a butterfly. And that's exciting for us. I enjoy solving problems, but it's not solving problems is to go checkbox, we solve the problems. If we don't get to do something different and better and improved, or even sometimes I just was working with a couple earlier that, she was describing that they don't, and I tell this to people, you often don't want to go back to the relationship you had.
Right.
Because logically, that's what's got you in my office in the first place. So we're not looking at reestablishing the caterpillar just able to crawl around. We're looking at, this is a whole new experience. This is transforming, but you don't have any skills to do it. So we're going to have to wrestle in the cocoon so you can know how to fly, or even know how to come out of the cocoon, how to dry your wings, how to wait, all that part is a long experience in many different steps. And sometimes it's done quickly because God's kind of miraculous. But I think in a general context of life, it can take a while. It can take months or years. And now for me, it's be a long time, a couple decades till I go, oh, that's the problem. Hello. Okay, we can work on that now.
Beth, do we have any comments on Facebook before we wrap down?
No, we have a
minutes
couple of
till we
people.
leave.
We have a couple of people out there watching, very quiet. I want to thank Joyce Wilkins. That's a new name, but thank you for joining and watching us today. But there are a couple of people out there, and Tony's here on Zoom. If you have any input, please let us know. But following Rich, I just like to say, I just love you both so much because it is so obvious that you spend a lot of time with God to hear for the direction of assisting his people. And Rich, just you're going through what you just said is so important that we make sure that we're communicating effectively today, that once you start to come out and to bloom and to blossom, that's a process. Life itself is a process, but you do the work. If you put the work in, do the shedding. And I like to say and extend, the greatest opportunity is probably coming out of the cocoon is to have a coach, like Rich said. It's so important because it's a new thing. It doesn't look like it did. I'm not crawling now. I've got to learn to use those wings to fly. And so coaching is so important. And these counselors are certified, they're licensed. It's a great opportunity. They're experienced more than anything, is what I'd say. All of that is more, all of that I noted is important for credibility, but experience is what you want. And then I think the most important is they seek God. God is in their business. And that is what you would benefit from by reaching out to them to talk about opportunities to experience your transformation in life. This has been a wonderful show today. I think it's well said. I'm looking forward to next week, and I'll give one of them an opportunity to introduce that in just a second. But what I'd like to say today is visit our website, gcbnetwork.com, Georgia Christian Business Network. We're putting God back in business. We have great opportunities for our Take Charge Tuesday power call. We have an opportunity also for you to join us as today at Wellness Wednesday programs, and also on Friday for our Friday Noon Nugget. We have some outstanding events that are upcoming. I want to in particular mention our April 30th God Golf and Girls Virtual Clinic that's going to happen with Taylor Allen as our golf enthusiast that is looking forward to sharing with you. If you'll bring your mop and bring your broom or whatever you have in your house, and she's going to share with us some golf techniques. Also, registration is open for God Golfing Girls, our 7th annual conference. I am so excited about that. Aren't you, Pamela? Pamela's one of our, as I said, both she and Rich are corporate sponsors, but she is a consistent sponsor of God Golfing Girls event, a healing journey. We're thankful for that. And for the last 7 years, can you believe this? She's been our opening speaker on Saturday morning. We have an outstanding lineup of speakers, presenters. We're going from therapeutic on Friday to transformational, what we're talking about today on Saturday, and Sunday is all about triumphant. So please join us. We're terribly excited to have you, and we would love to assist. If you have a challenge with registration, please reach out to me, because we're so thankful for Brandy Thomas to give us a donation that would be able to make a partial, what do you call it? Donation, scholarship for at least 3 women. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're looking forward to seeing you at the same place next Wednesday. I'm going to allow Pamela or Rich, probably Pamela, to talk about what we're going to talk about next week. All right.
I don't know the name. You know the name of the young lady who's going to be talking about transformation.
Sandra Stapp
and how
transformation.
Right, she been involved in addiction. So we're going to talk about transformation from a life that had been challenged with addiction. And then after that, we'll talk the last Wednesday of the month. We're talking about transformation in a life that's been challenged with mental illness.
Excellent. So next week is a transformation, a testimonial from addiction, and then the following week is from mental wellness. You'll want to join us. If you've listened or you're listening to the replay, our ask is that you'll share this with someone and invite them to listen and perhaps join us on next week. Guys, I love you. Thank you so much. I'm excited today. You know, I've got a guest coming to my home. Y'all know her this afternoon. Lisa Booth is coming to my home. Lisa and Jay. I'm so excited. Yes. And guess what? My package arrived while I was here. Drum just got back from the airport. And listen, I can't tell you who it is because I don't want Lisa to know just in case she's listening. All right. Okay. But you kind of can guess.
See you next
real.
week.
Yeah. See you next week. Love
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.